Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Inshallah, this program is divided into different days. Most probably, this could be the itinerary for those that are going. Obviously, depending on the time that a person has, the itinerary may change. And sometimes people prefer to spend 2 days in Jordan first, then go into Palestine and come back out. Some prefer to spend the entire time in Jordan first and then go to Palestine. Keeping in mind also the route, the places nearby. So inshallah, in the day 2, we will be discussing 3 places. One is Mutah, the second is Petra, and the third is the Blessed Tree. The route, if you can see, at the top is Amman. This is basically where we're going to be staying. And as we travel from Amman, then we will pass Mutah, and then Petra comes right in the south. So this is one route, and it's approximately 1 day this entire route can be covered. And then, although we have added this to this day, it's practically impossible to do this also on the same day, but just for the purposes of the program, the Blessed Tree. This is on the complete other side of Amman, closer to the Syrian border. So inshallah, more details about this Blessed Tree will come a little later. The first is Mutah. Obviously, Mutah is the famous battle of Islam that we have heard about, and this battle was fought in present-day Jordan. Obviously, in those days it was Sham. The battlefield of Mutah is at the south of Amman, approximately 1 hour 52 minutes, when I think there's no traffic, 136 kilometers inshallah, from Amman till Mutah. In the 8th year after Hijrah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent a letter to the leader of Busra, which falls in present-day Syria. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent a letter with a Sahabi by the name of Harith bin Umayr radhiyallahu anhu. So this Sahabi was going with the letter. He was an envoy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the leader of Busra in the 8th year after Hijrah. And when he reached a place called Mutah, the Roman governor of Sham at that time, Shurahbil bin Amr al-Ghassani, got him killed. Now obviously this was a very serious crime because it was against international law to kill an envoy. And he was killed at this time. When Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard about it, then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mobilized a force of 3,000 Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhum. So the army was prepared, and there was an unusual appointment. Meaning Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, unusually, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed 3 leaders. First, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed Zaid bin Haritha radhiyallahu anhu, and he said that if Zaid radhiyallahu anhu becomes shaheed, then Ja'far bin Abi Talib radhiyallahu anhu must lead the army. And if Ja'far radhiyallahu anhu becomes shaheed, then Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu must lead the army. So this was something very unusual. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam further said that if he becomes shaheed, then the Muslims must decide among themselves and appoint someone as their leader. So this was already an indication that all these Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhu would become shaheed. And there were very emotional exchanges when they left that proved this point, that they also knew that they would most probably be coming shaheed in this battle. It was the month of Jumad al-Ula, 8th year after Hijrah, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dispatched this army of 3,000 Sahaabah radiyallahu anhum. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam also accompanied the army right till Thaniyatul Wada, the place outside Medina Munawwara where they would come out to welcome people. The famous incident we have heard when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was entering Medina Munawwara and Tala al-Badru alayna, etc. min Thaniyatil Wada. To that point, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked out of Medina Munawwara and bidding farewell to this army. They were very close people that were in this army, and perhaps Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew that this was the last time that he was meeting them. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam bid them farewell, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave them various advices. Among the advices Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave them was that they must bear in mind taqwa, Allah consciousness and righteousness throughout their journey. And not to kill children, women and the elderly. These are the ethics of Islam and the morals of Islam. If you look at the map before us, Medina Munawwara is right in the south, and then Mutah is right at the top. En route, there's an orange rectangle that's highlighting a place called Ma'an. Now when Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhum reached this place Ma'an, then they were informed at this time that 200,000 Romans had gathered in an area called Balqa. Now Balqa was a very big area. This is the area that's known as Balqa. Perhaps it was the exact location or some approximate location. So Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhu were in Ma'an, the red circle at the bottom, and the Romans were the red circle on the top. And the battlefield of Mutah is in between. So when they reached this place, obviously Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhu, now 3,000 Sahaba, 200,000 Romans, they never expected such a fierce and such a large army. So they speak among themselves, they camp here for 2 nights in Ma'an, and they discuss what should we do. Should we go ahead, or should we inform Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam? If Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us to go ahead, we'll go ahead. But we should inform Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam so he knows the situation, that there are 200,000 enemy that's awaiting us. So while they were discussing it, Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu, who was appointed as the third leader of the army, he delivered a very fiery speech, a very fiery bayan, in which he explained to the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhu, he says, Ya qawm, inna allati takrahun, lallati kharajtum tatlubun ash-shahada. He says that the thing that you are now worried about, that was the exactly same thing that you left Madinah Munawwara for. You left Madinah Munawwara for shahadat and martyrdom. Now you are worried that we are going to face this enemy. What's going to happen? We will lose our life. That martyrdom that we wanted, we will attain that martyrdom. So what's the fear that we have? وَمَا نُقَاتِلُ النَّاسَ بِعَدَدٍ وَلَا قُوَّةٍ وَلَا كَثْرَةٍ مَا نُقَاتِلُهُمْ إِلَّا بِهَذَا الدِّينَ الَّذِي أَكْرَمَنَ اللَّهُ بِهِ. Very famous words of Abdullah bin Rawaha radiyallahu anhu, wherein he says that we don't fight the enemy because of our number, because of our strength, or because of our abundant forces. This is not what we use to fight the enemy. We fight them on the basis of deen, which Allah has blessed us with. Whether they're 200,000 or 2, it doesn't make a difference. We have the deen and we will go and fight these people. And then he goes on to say that there's only one of 2 things that will happen. And both these things are good for us and it's our fortune. Imma zuhurun wa imma shahada. Either we will be victorious or either we will be martyred in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum heard this bayan and this address of Abdullah bin Rawaha radiyallahu anhu, they all said that by Allah you have spoken the truth. And then Sahaba radiyallahu anhu agreed that we will continue with our march towards the Romans. Until finally they came to the battlefield of Mutah. This is a picture of the battlefield of Mutah. Inshallah, a little later we will show better pictures of the battlefield. So they reached the battlefield of Mutah. Now let us put ourselves in the picture. 200,000 armed Romans who were experts in war. And there are 3,000, a small group of 3,000 Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. Now on this battlefield, the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum meet these Romans. If we look at this battlefield, a point just to keep in mind, it's a flat plain. There's no mountains to hide behind, there's nothing there. It's a flat plain. And 3,000 facing 200,000. There was nothing else that they could do but just fight till they would lose their lives or they will be victorious. So, according to the instruction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Zaid bin Haritha radiyallahu anhu holds the banner of Islam, and Zaid bin Haritha radiyallahu anhu fights very, very bravely until finally Zaid bin Haritha radiyallahu anhu falls on the battlefield of Mutah as a shaheed. According to the instruction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ja'far radiyallahu anhu now takes the banner of Islam and he begins to fight mounted on his horse. Until his horse was wounded, Ja'far radiyallahu anhu dismounts, encircled by enemy around him. And now on the ground, Ja'far radiyallahu anhu fights. His right hand is chopped off. He takes the flag in the left hand. The left hand is chopped off. He holds the flag of Islam in his bosoms until Ja'far radiyallahu anhu also is made shaheed. While fighting, he mentioned very, very strange words of poetry. Ya habbadha al-jannatu waqtirabuha طيبة وباردا شرابها والروم روم قد دنا عذابها كافرة بعيدة أنسابها علي إذ لاقيتها ضرابها. Where he says how magnificent and how pure is Jannat, and the environment around Jannat, and how cool and how beautiful and pleasant is the water of Jannat. And he says that the Romans, their adab has come, their punishment has come close to them. They are kafirs and they have no type of relationship with us whatsoever. And when I meet them, I will definitely strike them. And as we explained, he dismounted his animal and then finally he was made shaheed. And because of both his arms being chopped off in this battlefield, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaced him with wings with which he is flying in Jannah as a reward and as a thawab for him. So, when Ja'far radiyallahu anhu, the second Amir, now becomes shaheed, and Abdullah bin Rawaha radiyallahu anhu, as per the instruction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he takes the banner. But when he takes the banner, there was a slight hesitation. Not that he wanted to run away or flee from the battlefield, but he didn't go straight into the battle as the other Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhu went. There was a slight hesitation. And when there was that slight hesitation, he addresses his nafs. And he says to his nafs, "Aqsamtu ya nafsu latunzilanna, karihatan aw latutawi'anna." O nafs, come down, dismount this horse of yours. Whether you like it or not, you will have to go ahead and fight in the path of Allah. Mali araki takrahin al-jannah. Why is it that I find you disliking Jannat? Why aren't you going forward? And then in this way, Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu goes forward. His one cousin gives him a piece of meat, a bowl with some meat. And he says to him that you haven't eaten for so many days. You're going to fight now, just eat a little to get the strength and go forward. He takes one bite and then he says, meet you in Jannah. In our words. That I haven't got time for this. That people are giving their lives in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now you are involved in worldly pursuits. Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu throws that bone with that meat and he goes and he also gives his life. The third Amir gives his life as the prediction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now a Sahabi by the name of Thabit bin Akhram radhiyallahu anhu grabs hold of the flag. Because obviously the flag needed to be held up. He grabs hold of the flag and he says, "Oh Muslims, now decide who is going to be your Amir." As per the instruction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they say to him, "You got the flag, you become the Amir." He says, "No, I am incompetent. I am incompetent." And he takes it and gives it to Khalid bin Walid radhiyallahu anhu. And he says that you are competent, you are very, very experienced in warfare, and you can now lead the army. All the Muslims agreed upon Khalid radhiyallahu anhu being the Amir. Obviously the great warrior that he was. And now Khalid radhiyallahu anhu fights. On that day, according to the narration of Sahih Bukhari, 9 swords broke in the hand of Khalid radhiyallahu anhu. He says there was only one Yemeni sword that could manage in my hand. Imagine with what force he must have been striking, that 9 swords break in his hand. Then it was nightfall. The next morning Khalid radhiyallahu anhu used a very strategic move. Still 3,000 Sahaabah, small number, obviously losing all these close friends of theirs, losing their leaders, the morale was down. 3,000 Sahaabah, 200,000 Romans. Khalid radhiyallahu anhu thinks of a move, very strategic move, and he changes the army. So the front of the army was moved back, the back was moved in the front, and the right and left, the 2 flanks were changed. When the Romans saw new faces, they thought reinforcements came. So naturally they became a bit hesitant, and they became a bit reluctant, and the steam that they had broke. They felt that these people have got some reinforcements, and because of that, alhamdulillah, with the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Khalid radhiyallahu anhu managed to save the Muslim army, and they won the battle. In this battle, the amazing thing is, only 12 Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhum became shaheed. Only 12 shaheed, but all 3 leaders became shaheed. It shows that the leaders were right in the forefront, not at the back giving instructions. They were right in the front and they lost their lives. But apart from that, only 12 Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhum altogether had lost their lives. And this was happening on the battlefield of Mutah. On the other hand, in Medina Munawwara, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ascends the mimbar. And he calls the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum as-salatu jami'ah. This was a call to call the people to the masjid. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam called the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum. And now there was live coverage. Today we boast about live coverage. Many a times the live coverage entails pictures of animate objects. Here there was a live coverage that was taking place. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in Medina Munawwara giving full coverage exactly what's happening on the battlefield. Sahaba radhiyallahu anhu in front of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, now Zaid radhiyallahu anhu is fighting. He's holding the flag. He falls on the battlefield. And then next, Jafar radhiyallahu anhu takes the flag. He also fights very bravely. And now he also falls. While it was happening, exactly at the same time, precisely Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is giving the live coverage in Medina Munawwara. Before the time of technology, it was only the mu'jiza of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then after Jafar radhiyallahu anhu, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu has taken the flag. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam stops for a slight pause. That was that hesitation. That Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu had showed slight hesitation. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had also expressed it with that pause. That was the hesitation, the pause, and then finally Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu becomes shaheed. And then when Khalid radhiyallahu anhu takes the flag, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that Khalid radhiyallahu an, the sword of Allah, has taken your flag, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam makes dua, Allahumma innahu sayfum min suyufik fa anta tansuru. Oh Allah, he is a sword of yours, so you help him. And since that day, Khalid radhiyallahu an was known as the sword of Allah. At this point, Hazrat Maulana Yaqub Sahib rahmatullahi alayhi used to see, he was a great alim, great ustad of Darul the ustad of Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanvi rahmatullahi alayhi, etc. He would say that Khalid radhiyallahu an was all the time on the battlefield, but yet he did not attain martyrdom. He says possibly the reason for this, the wisdom behind this is that because he was the sword of Allah, that sword of Allah could not be broken. If Khalid radiallahu anh had to be martyred, it would mean the sword of Allah was broken. So Khalid radiallahu anh, despite going into the thick of the enemy in every battle, he never attained martyrdom, and that was because he was the sword of Allah and that couldn't be broken. After this, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very greatly saddened. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam teared as well. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to the house of Ja'far radiallahu anhu, a lengthy incident, how he went and consoled them. And for 3 days, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam stayed in the masjid. Stayed in the masjid for 3 days. Obviously, they were very, very close people to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we will discuss a little later regarding the Sahaabah radiallahu anhu. They were very close to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because of the closeness, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was greatly saddened. Now, let us picture ourselves on the battlefield. This is the battlefield of Mutah. As we had explained, there's no mountains, there's nothing to hide behind. And from that time up till today, this is still that same battlefield of Mutah, where Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhum had given their lives in this manner, and had shown such bravery and such valor for the sake and for the cause of Islam. Now when we visit these places, it's not just for us to learn some history and to say, been there, done that. Rather, it is for us to take lesson from all of this. That this is where Sahaabah radiallahu anhum had given their lives. And this is what they had done for the cause of Islam. And what are we doing? Obviously, we are not being asked to do this much. But the little sacrifices that we are asked to be made, are we prepared to make these sacrifices? When these Sahaabah radiallahu anhum on the day of Qiyamah, when we meet them, so sometimes we may be named after them. But what answer will we be able to give them when they say that this is what we had done for Islam and what have you done for Islam? So these are places of reflection. And obviously there's great ruhaniyat, great spirituality in these places. When we go to these places, we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, beg Allah to bless us with those qualities that Sahaba radiallahu anhu had, etc. There's an interesting point that till not very long ago, and this has been explained from various sources. Hazrat Mufti Rafi Usmani Dawood Barakatuh has written this in his kitab as well. And while we went there was a brother, his famous brother, many South Africans know him, Sheikh Hassan. He had explained this to us. Certain people, when he went there, when he took them, he called certain old people of the town and he asked them. And they say, up till not very long ago, they would occasionally hear the sound of horses, the sound of the clashing of swords, etc. from this area in Mutah. Until when there was a university that was built nearby, opposite the battlefield of Mutah. At that time when the university was built, obviously it comes with its own culture, and because of that, now they no more hear these sounds. So this is the battlefield of Mutah. Not far away from here is the mazarat and the graves of the 3 amirs of this army that passed away in the army. They are buried not very far away from the battlefield of Mutah. So obviously, after visiting the battlefield of Mutah, it's only right for us to pay our respects at the graves of these Sahaabah radiallahu anhum. Zaid bin Haritha radiallahu anhu, very quickly, to discuss who he was. He is the only Sahabi who's mentioned by name in the Quraan Majeed. فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِّنْهَا وَطَرًا. The only Sahabi whose name appears in the Quraan Majeed. He was the first slave to accept Islam. We all have heard the incident of he was a slave of Khadija radiallahu anha. She had gifted him to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he was a slave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Finally Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had freed him. And then when his father and his uncle had come, and they came to request Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam that please allow us to take him back, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the option is his, he can choose. And when the choice was given to him, he thought that he will never choose slavery over freedom. He would obviously choose freedom, but Zaid radiyallahu anh says that I have seen such qualities of this man, mala ufariquhu abada, that I can never separate from him, I can never leave him. And he preferred, can we imagine, preferred being a slave in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to freedom and going back to his family. At that occasion, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam freed him, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, from today he is no more my slave, now he is my son, and therefore he is known as the adopted son of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not only that, he is famously known in the books of history as Hibbu Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the beloved of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can imagine when he was so close to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam for so many years, he was with Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam must have been affected at this occasion when he was shaheed. But obviously all these sacrifices were made for the sake of Islam. Then Ja'far radhiyallahu anhu, the second leader, he was very, very close to Rasulullah as well, being the first cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not just the first cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu, rather Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, "Ashbahta khalqi wa khuluqi." O Ja'far radhiyallahu anhu, you resemble me both in appearance and in character. So outwardly and inwardly he resembled Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The famous incident when they migrated to Abyssinia before Najashi, and the famous address that Ja'far radhiyallahu anhu had given before Najashi, in which he gave the da'wat of Islam in such a profound manner, where then we find that Najashi, the king of Abyssinia, also accepted Islam, and he was so open and so welcoming to the Muslims. So Ja'far radhiyallahu anhu was this Sahabi. And then finally, at the occasion of Khaybar, in the 7th year after Hijrah, he returns. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhum were just victorious in Khaybar. The expedition just ended. They were victorious, and Ja'far radhiyallahu anhu and his companions returned from Abyssinia. At that occasion, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, I'm not sure whether I'm happier with the victory of Khaybar, or I'm happier with the return of Ja'far radhiyallahu anhu and his companions. This was in the 7th year after Hijrah. And in the 8th year, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sends him out in the path of Allah. And then he leaves this world. Again, the sacrifices that they made. And obviously the great sacrifices that Ja'far radhiyallahu anhu made on the battlefield. As we explained, when we're standing at these places, we need to be pondering that this is what he had done. Gave his right hand, gave his left hand, until he was chopped off. His head was chopped off. Abdullah bin Umar radhiyallahu anhu says that on that day we counted the wounds on his body. 90 wounds only on the front of his body. Nothing on the back. So only advancing, 90 wounds. Can you imagine 90 wounds? There won't be a part of the body without any wounds. 90 wounds. So this is what they had done. Now again, we ponder. And we strengthen and we reiterate our allegiance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We re-strengthen our allegiance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they have presented all of this, then what are we presenting? Small sacrifices for the sake of deen. To fulfill the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To stay away from sin. To stay away from vice. These are small things, although we may feel them to be challenging. These were the challenges that Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhum had undergone. And these were the great sacrifices that they had made. Then the third Amir, Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu, a little regarding him. Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu was from the Ansar of Medina Munawwara, and he was a famous poet. Famous poet in Jahiliyyah before Islam, and after accepting Islam as well. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would ask him to recite poetry. And in fact, certain poems of his, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would also recite these poems. Wallahi lawla anta mahtadina, wala tasaddaqna, wala sallayna. Famous poetries of Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would also recite these poems of Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu. Obviously Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would not make his own poetry. Because the Qur'an Sharif says very, very clearly that وَمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ الشِّعْرَ وَمَا يَنْبَغِي لَهُ. That Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not know poetry. There was a reason behind it also. They could have leveled this allegation against Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that because you were a poet, you made up the Qur'an. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not make up any poetry from his side, but he would recite certain poems of other poets, good meanings, etc. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would often repeat the poems of Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu. And then there's an incident of the obedience that Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu showed for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdullah bin Rawaha radhiyallahu anhu was outside the masjid. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Idrisu, sit down." Right outside the masjid, he sits down. The level of obedience, that when these words of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam has come into my ears, although I may be outside the masjid, how can I not sit? Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying sit. Obviously what was meant was those in the masjid. But I have heard this, the level of obedience, I have heard these words, I can't move ahead, I have to sit down right here. Now, this level of obedience for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, these are things for us to reflect upon when we present ourselves at the graves of these great Sahaabah radhiyallahu anhum. Next, as we had explained in the map, is Petra. And we will explain regarding Petra. This is a very ancient city. It's in the south, further down from Mutah, approximately 2 hours, 9 minutes from Mutah is the city of Petra. Firstly, we want to encourage people to go there. It's a very famous tourist attraction, but it's not for the old. Because it's very, very difficult to walk down, so it's not for the old at all. And there's an entrance fee. A few years ago it was $50. I'm not sure what's the entrance fee now. Everything that's related to deen we can see for free. But now here we'll have to pay. There's very ancient architecture. Very, very ancient architecture, as we can see. Very ancient carving into the mountain. Obviously it's something to marvel over. How they have carved their homes into the mountain. And there was an amazing water system that they had built. They had built an amazing water system, again carving it from the mountains. They had carved these water systems. Some people feel that these are the Ad and Samud lived in these areas, but the more famous view is that it was the Nabateans. They were ancient Arabs, very, very ancient Arabs which lived here, and most probably no azab had come to this place. No azab had come to this place, but over time and because of some floods, etc. that had happened, so many of these buildings have been demolished. But as we explained, there's no real Islamic significance in this place. But it's a famous tourist attraction and famous tourist place, therefore we have covered it as well. Then there's something very, very unique which many people don't know about, and very recently now people have come to know about this, is the blessed tree. We can see the direction of this tree. It's 2 hours, 9 minutes from Amman. Not in the south. As we explained earlier, it's not possible to do it on the same day, but if someone wants to do it on another day, it's a whole day. Generally will take an entire day, and the road also is quite difficult, road towards the end. Preferably, or actually not preferably, I think it's a must to go with a 4x4. So if the guide is taking, then we should ensure that the vehicle is also right. Now this tree is something very unique that has been discovered not very long ago. Now if we look at this video, there's no people in this video. In the middle of a desert, we can see there's desert and desert and desert. Until your eye can see there's desert, and then all of a sudden, there's a tree that comes. Now there's something unique about this tree. In the middle of the desert, there's just this one tree. Then if you look further, now in certain seasons of the year, this is the sand, the soil under the tree. Very, very dry. So generally, it won't be possible, or generally you won't find a tree standing in this kind of terrain. But despite that, there's a very ancient tree. If you look at the roots of the tree and the bark of the tree, it's very, very ancient. It's a very old tree. Now what the discovery is, that has been discovered by the royal family of Jordan, that this tree actually falls on the route to Syria. The old route to Syria, we can see Makkah at the bottom. Makkah is at the bottom, and Busra at the top. Busra was in Syria, where generally the Arabs would go for trade. إِلَافِهِمْ رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ, that's spoken about in the Quraan Majeed. Obviously this is the Google map route, and in those days they didn't follow Google Maps. But somewhere along this route, maybe over some mountain, whatever, they traveled along this route. Now along this route to Syria is the tree. This tree, up till today, it's in the same location. And near the tree, there's a very ancient route also, a very old route, that a person has to travel on this route to reach there as well. So it seems like in previous times, people were traveling on this route. It was a route that people would be traveling on. Now what the feeling is and the discovery is, there's a famous incident that when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was 12 years old, then Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam traveled with his uncle Abu Talib to Busra, to Syria. And as he was traveling, they had passed by a Christian monk by the name of Bahira or Buhaira. It's two ways that's mentioned in the kitabs of pronouncing the name. Buhaira or Bahira, the Rahib, the Christian monk. And as they were traveling, and they had settled in a certain place, then he came to ask that who is this child and who is the guardian of this child. So they asked him that normally we travel here, you don't come out from your monastery. Why is it that you came out this time from your monastery? So he says, no, I saw something amazing. As they were coming, every stone and every tree bowed to this child. And when you came here, then everyone had taken the shade of this tree, and when he came, there was no shade for him. But when he settled down, when he sat down, the shade of the tree moved to give shade to him. So this seems to be the Nabi. He was a Christian monk, he was aware of these things, this seems to be the Nabi. And because of that, he says to Abu Talib, you the guardian, you take him back. Because if the Jews come to know of him, they will kill him. They won't allow him to live. Because obviously this Nabi is the Nabi that they hate. They don't want this Nabi to come. So you take him back and don't go ahead with him. So most probably, obviously, many of these places we can't say definitely. Definitely we can't say that these are the places, but there are many indications to show that this is probably the tree that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had sat under. And this is a very interesting point that has been mentioned by Mufti Rafi Usmani Dawud Barakatuhum. This point applies to all the different places of ziyarat that we will be going to. He says that although we can't say definitely that this is the tree, or for example, we can't say definitely this Nabi was buried here, or this Nabi came here. Sometimes because of obviously so many years, thousands of years have passed, and this history was not preserved. Like how the history was preserved in Makkah Mukarramah and Medina Munawwara. So the history wasn't preserved. There were various different rules that had come. Sometimes it was destroyed, demolished, and it was rebuilt, etc. So many of these things we can't say definitely. But he says for a lover, just the possibility of his beloved being there, or his beloved coming there, that is enough for him. Obviously we should not go overboard and do some type of bid'at, etc. in these places. First of all, it's not definite, but just the possibility that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had sat under this tree is enough for us to go and visit this place and to take barakat from this place. Inshallah, now we'll go to Amman first. We'll have a nice sleep because we're quite tired, and inshallah the next day we'll continue, inshallah.